What if the Library of Alexandria never burned? Imagine a building that held every piece of knowledge the ancient world ever produced. Every discovery, every philosophy, every map of lands we've since forgotten. Now imagine it was destroyed and we lost it all. The Library of Alexandria was the closest thing the ancient world had to the internet. And when it burned, humanity may have been set back by centuries. But what if it hadn't? What if those flames never touched a single scroll? Let's set the record straight first. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just some dusty archive. At its peak, it held an estimated 400 scrolls, the accumulated wisdom of Egypt, Greece, Babylon, Persia, and India. Works by Aristotle we've never read, complete histories of civilizations we barely know existed, maps that may have charted coastlines Europeans wouldn't discover for another 1,000 years. When scholars arrived in Alexandria, their books were copied and sometimes the originals were kept. It was aggressive, it was brilliant, and it worked. Here's where it gets fascinating. A Greek engineer named Hero of Alexandria built a working steam engine, the Aeolipial, in the 1st century AD. It was treated as a novelty, a toy. But if the library had survived, connecting Hero's engineering with other preserved knowledge, the Industrial Revolution might not have waited until the 1700s. We could be talking about steam-powered Roman ships by the 3rd century. The gap between interesting gadget and world-changing technology is often just the right knowledge landing in the right hands. The library contained medical texts from across the ancient world, Galen's complete works, Egyptian surgical techniques, Indian Ayurvedic manuscripts. If these had been preserved and cross-referenced by successive generations of scholars, the concept of germ theory might have emerged 1,000 years earlier. The Black Death, which killed a third of Europe's population in the 1340s, might have been understood and contained. Millions who died in medieval plagues could have lived. Some historians believe the library held maps and navigation records that documented coastlines far beyond what we assume the ancients knew. Eratosthenes, a library scholar, calculated the Earth's circumference with stunning accuracy in 240 BC. If that cartographic knowledge had been preserved and built upon, organized maritime exploration could have begun centuries earlier. Portuguese and Spanish explorers wouldn't have been pioneers, they'd have been following ancient routes. Alexandria wasn't just a Greek city. It sat at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The library reflected that diversity. Buddhist texts sat alongside Zoroastrian scriptures. Hebrew theology was debated next to Greek philosophy. If this intellectual melting pot had continued for centuries, the rigid separation between Eastern and Western thought might never have happened. Philosophy wouldn't have gone dark during the European Middle Ages, it would have accelerated. Here's an interesting wrinkle. Would the printing press have been invented sooner, or would it have been unnecessary? With a surviving library as the central knowledge hub, the pressure to mass-produce texts might have been different, but more likely, the sheer volume of preserved knowledge would have demanded better copying methods. Chinese woodblock printing techniques, already documented in library records, could have been adapted and improved centuries before Gutenberg. Information wouldn't just survive, it would spread. The European Dark Ages happened partly because so much knowledge was lost. Without the library's destruction, the intellectual infrastructure of the ancient world might have survived intact. Universities could have emerged in the 5th century instead of the 12th. Literacy rates wouldn't have collapsed. The scientific method, which we credit to the 1600s, could have been formalized a millennium earlier. The Dark Ages might simply have been ages. If you compress the timeline, steam power by the 3rd century, germ theory by the 6th, the printing press by the 8th, then by the time our actual Renaissance happened in the 1400s, this alternate world would already be in its own industrial revolution. Telescopes pointed at the stars. Ships crossing oceans with precision instruments. Mathematics centuries ahead of where it actually was. By the year 1000 AD, this world might look like our 1800s. Take this thought experiment to its logical conclusion. If technology advanced at even twice the historical rate, humans could have been exploring space not in the 1960s, but in the 960s. That sounds absurd until you realize that the 1,000-year delay between Hero's steam engine and the actual Industrial Revolution was entirely caused by lost knowledge. The gap wasn't in human capability, it was in access to information. Of course, history is never this simple. The library didn't burn in one dramatic fire. It declined over centuries through neglect, religious conflict, and political instability. Knowledge is fragile, and preserving it takes more than walls and shelves. But the lesson resonates today. We've built our own Library of Alexandria. It's called the Internet, and just like the original, it's vulnerable to forces we don't always see coming. The burning of the Library of Alexandria wasn't just the loss of a building. It was the loss of a future one where humanity moved faster, understood more, and connected earlier. We'll never know exactly what was on those 400 scrolls, but the fact that we're still asking that question, 2,000 years later, tells you everything about what we lost. The real tragedy isn't that the library burned. It's that we had to start over.